let's put a bow on the regular season before we look to postseason and some of the sound bites that have come out this week. You know, this team finishes 51-31 on the campaign. You have how many teams so far? 7 teams so far. Indiana just won today, so they were the 7 teams to hit 50 or more wins. So the Knicks are one of 7 teams in the league right now to have 50 or more. Up and down season, as we know, as we've experienced. On the plus side, look, yeah, 2 All-Stars in Jalen and Karl-Anthony Towns. You'd expect Jalen to be in that All-NBA running, clutch player of the year. On the defensive side, OG Anunoby should definitely be in consideration for All-NBA defense. So you had some bright individual spots, performances. We can talk about that from the 50-point games to multiple 40-point games between OG and Mikal Bridges. You had some individual bright moments, but clearly there were a lot of rough patches in this season. When you talk about the fact that they did not beat Boston or the Cavs or the Thunder at all this year. The reality is they went 15-23 against teams 500 and above. They went 15-23 against those teams. Last year, conversely, they went 21-28 against those teams last year. But nevertheless, they were 15-23 against teams 500 or better. With these trades, there were certain givens with the trades that they made. That the bench was going to be hollowed out and that the defense was going to be a bit more suspect. And I think we saw that pretty consistently this year. So, like AP in the chat says, he thinks that they underachieved. What do you think? Did they underachieve this year for finishing 3rd in the East?
I don't think they underachieved. I don't think they overachieved either. I think it's somewhere right dab in the middle. And I just want to point out, you mentioned that team that went 21-28 last season. We should just also recognize that there was a lot of change for that team, who you started out with quickly, Grimes, RJ. You think about the change that they did. You lose Randall for the rest of the season. OG missed time. You lost Mitch back in December of last season. There was a lot of change. So for that team, if you think about it, last year, for that team to go 21-28 against 500, against 21-28 to go against teams over 500, pretty impressive. Now, with the stat that you brought up today, was it 13-21 that you mentioned?
13 and no, hang on. Let me go back and make sure I'm accurate here. They went 15-23. Against 500 and both. 15-23.
15-23. For the trades that you made this season, you hope that you get a little bit better, especially with the 2 big off-season trades that you made for Bridges and Cat. You would expect that they would thrust themselves into that, championship contender title this season. With that being said, I understand that the bench was decimated after the trades that you made. But I think for even the expectations that you have this season with that starting 5 and how they competed this year, it's a good season for them in year 1. Not a great season, a good season, because you can argue saying, hey, first year, put this team together. There's still some more rounding out that they have to do for the bench to make sure that they can compete, so that way you can get guys rest. I think coaching-wise, it was a little bland for most of the season, where you just knew exactly what was going to happen. But I don't think there's an overachieving and underachieving in the season. They did what they could, and winning 50 games should not be scoffed at. It was a good season for them. But if we're sticking on the regular season, I think because of the inconsistent play on defense and the guys that you acquired, mainly Mikal Bridges, if he had a great season, I think then you say it's a great season. But because of where it is, it's just right dab in the middle, man.
Yeah. I'm with you. I don't think they overachieved. I don't think they underachieved. I think this is based on the trades that they made, and they went from having one of the best benches to one of the worst. Even though guys off the bench came in, like Shamet was a good ending story, they were what they were. I think on paper we saw that once they made that trade. So I think where they finished is where I expected them to finish. I did expect them to have more signature games like they did last year. That was a little bit disappointing for me, is that they didn't have more signature games, especially against either Boston or Cleveland. Because in those first, the first Cleveland game, which was early in the season, you can't really glean too much off of it. They had the lead, they blew the lead, and they lost. But then, if you want to argue that, okay, the rest were on the second night of a back-to-back, so it was a little bit harder, okay. But even the Boston games, the first three out of the four, they weren't even in the same league.
Nope.
Right? So that was a little bit disheartening when you look at that. The first OKC game, shot out the gates very well. Had a sizable lead on the road, and it all went to shit in the end. Pardon my French. The second OKC game, not in the same league. So it was tough, right?
On your own home court.
On your own home court.
And after you hear Brunson and Hart talk about how they know the importance of playing these games and stepping up and showing where you can match. And so that's why it's like, it's a good season. I think that's why this fan base too, man. Like we hear it all the time on all socials, on the show, when people call in, even in the chat, even in the comment section. It's why there's such a divide. It's true. Like the Hatfield and McCoys, like, don't worry, you're gonna have this team turn up in the postseason, and then others are like, hey man, it's just kind of like an impending doom for some of them, saying, look, we see the second round exit against Boston, but that's why this regular season is what it is. And we're just mapping out the regular season. We're not including postseason,
right?
But I don't know, man. What would you give it as a grade for the regular season?
The regular season, say B-.
Going B-?
Going B-.
I'm gonna go a little high. I'll go a little high. I'll go B, just because I feel like that's just kind of like, look. And the thing that I'll give it a B for is that we did have 2 All-Stars. There'd probably going to be 2 All-NBA guys too, so that's
fair.
why
That
Cat
goes by the regular definitely season. Make All-NBA, right?
Cat should definitely. I mean, if you're going to be an MVP consideration, you have to be up there.
Yeah.
Brunson got the 65. We know how impactful he is. He's up there in MVP voting as well. So
plus there's 3 teams, guys, right? There's 3 teams.
There's 3 teams, so they should definitely make it.
Yeah.
But then it's like that is why I'm going to put it as a B, because still awesome. We know what the flaws of this team are defensively. But yeah, I'm going to go with a B for myself, man. Oh my God, people putting D.
What do you guys think in the chat? They're grade them in the chat, man. I know they're going crazy. Throw your grades in the chat.
D. Wow.
Throw your grades in the chat.
People are agreeing with us, man.
Yeah.
They see B- and B.
Yeah. Okay. So we're within the ballpark of the people. They're good people at home. So they finish 5th in offensive rating, 13th in defense, and 8th overall in net rating. I'm with you in that, especially from the defensive perspective. I didn't expect with Towns at the 5 that they would be great or even close to elite. He just is what it is. No coach can fix what Karl-Anthony Towns doesn't have up here. You just can't.
It's 10 years, bro.
It's 10 years. 10 years. It's 10 years, and how many coaches? Like, every coach is not going to turn a guy into an all-world defender. So I expected them to have their woes with him at the 5. The Bridges thing was more disappointing, or I don't know. It's hard to say disappointing. Underwhelming. Perfect word. The Bridges thing was more underwhelming in terms of what we thought the potential could be of the entire Wingstop unit with Bridges, Anunoby, and Hart. And it became very underwhelming, especially against the elites. Against the regular teams, we were good to go. Against the elites, it became an issue that I didn't really see coming. I thought we would have been a bit more stout there. So, but then you saw that when his role increased, he became a better all-around player. So that was when Brunson would be out of game, or if Towns is out of game, or Hart's out of game, like Bridges steps up, or OG's out, like his role changes. And then when he gets more offensive role, you see him kind of lock in a little bit more defensively.
It's always interesting, man, when you see players who get a little bit more offensive responsibility, how much the defensive intensity turns up. And I think this is something that the front office will look into the offseason, is it too many chefs in the kitchen? This is kind of like the Chris Bosh situation. Not saying that, Bridges is up there with the talent of Chris Bosh, but like when you have 3 guys, especially after this after the performance that Bridges had in Brooklyn, where all right, now you're on ball a lot more than you were out in Phoenix. You are that guy, and now you get to think even before the Cat trade happened that hey, it's going to be me, Julius, and Brunson sharing the rock, and maybe I get to usurp Julius because I could do a little bit more creation on ball, a little bit more, be a little bit more stable than what he can. Obviously, that doesn't happen. Now you bring in Cat, who demands the ball a lot because to utilize his talent, he has to have the rock. You can't use Bridges to that degree, and so I think maybe that may have caught him off guard, after that trade happened, and then with how his role on this team being constantly paired with all of them and not given a free reign like RJ was with that second unit. I feel like that's kind of like, mess with the mentality of like, how do I go out there and perform my type of game? Now, with all that being said, if you know what the role is, you still got to perform that role. Like if they're asking you to be that top defender against, the primary ball handler for the opposing team, the guys who are going to initiate, you still got to go out there and perform, man. That's not going to change. You're brought in here to do your job. And so with that being said, I understand the frustration potentially, or just not even necessarily the frustration, but the complexity of how Bridges needs to, stay activated within the Knicks, system. But at the end of the day, you got to go out there and compete against Tatum, Brown, even when you play Trae Young first time and you allow them to do the dice roll, even more recently against Garland. Like, you have Mitchell Robinson back there. Garland is getting you on his hip, and then you're trailing him, and then he's still getting buckets. Not a good look for Bridges, man. So it's definitely been an underwhelming season. And the only thing that you can hope is that going into next year, that he's able to figure a lot of these things out, because this is a 3-4 year project. You can't just say, all right, after 1 year, it's done. And I get that in year one. And I'm right there too with the fans, man. Like, I want to see a little bit more from this team in year one, but it's still a project. And so hopefully the next year he could step it up and things get a little bit more towards smooth sailing for him.
Yeah. I mean, look, the Heatles had their struggles in terms of adjusting to new roles. But if you look at it, that was just three guys. Monumental, two monumental guys and a big-time all-star in Bosh, but that was just three, right? Mario Chalmers knew his job. Defend, catch, and shoot threes. Udonis Haslem, get it gritty. Shane Battier, 3-and-D. Mike Miller, 3-and-D. Like, all their roles were defined, and once they came together, you saw how it worked out. It was up to Bron and Bosh and Wade to really figure out their sacrifice. For this team, it's even worse because you got five guys who you can make an argument all need the rock in their hands to a certain degree to be impactful, especially Josh Hart. Like, he's not a guy who's just going to sit there and catch and shoot.
He's not a catch-and-shoot guy.
While he can just rebound and play defense. Like, to get him going offensively, he's got to have the ball in his hands and try to make things happen. McCall, same way. OG wants to be that guy. Cat has to be that guy. Like, Brunson has to be that guy. So I think they got caught up this year also in trying to figure out the roles. And you could even see it when Brunson came back, that they were trying to figure that out again and reconfigure things. So I think that's why you had the result that you had, both on the defensive side and the offensive side. What I am encouraged by, at least with this iteration of the team, was that the defense had improved with the addition of Mitch, with Deuce getting healthy. Like, the defense has potential, and I don't think that whether it's by the coach's stubbornness or by design as you head into the playoffs, we have not seen, both defensively and offensively, the Knicks' most optimal units, rotations, lineups. I want to say that it's more by design. But we will see come game one, whenever it is, next Saturday, next Sunday. Especially with the Mitch thing, because they were ramping him up. They started him 12 to 15 minutes. They limited him on the back-to-backs, which, from what I heard, was a frustrating topic for Tibbs because he wanted him out there. And I think the medical staff wanted to make sure that, they paced him accordingly. So I have to think that we're going to see more of those two big lineups, for example, especially against Detroit. You need it. I would even make the case that you got to start Mitch over Hart in this series.
Oh, yeah. I think you should start Mitch the entire postseason, personally. I think that's how it should go. If you're going to ask me, like, even against the Celtics, that second quarter, And campaign, like I really wish campaign just had the understanding of like, yo, it's not about you, man. It's about everybody else.
Yeah.
You're just the point guard, set guys up. But that second quarter, when you had Mitch and Cat out there for 5 minutes, all right, you could get the plus minus at 0. But with your own eyes, if you watch that, Boston was on their heels. Cat was like, yo, I can go do my thing. And defensively, you just saw the struggle when you try to attack the lane against Mitchell Robinson, okay? No one's saying Mitch is going to stop Tatum or stop Brown, but there is a second you have to pause and you have to think when you're going to enter the paint and Mitchell Robinson is there. And so with that two-man lineup, I think you should have Mitch starting for the rest of the postseason because I think that's going to be your best shot defensively against all these teams. You can't have Cat and Brunson out there. We just know, man. It's just they're going to pick and roll them to death, man. They're going to get Brunson into the action, get Cat into the action. It doesn't matter, man. And look, you have to live with the decisions and the actions that your opponent calls defensively at times. But if you want to have a good chance, you're going to have Mitchell. You got to have Mitchell Robinson out there. There's just no question about it. But the thing I will say, CP, is that with what Minnesota did, right? With what Finch did once they got Gobert to pair with Cat, you saw it took quite some time. It took over a whole year for those guys to figure out how do you share the floor together, right? And so, look, I know Cat has experience playing with Rudy. He's actually one of the best bigs when looking for a 5 for like lobs and just passing to them. So I would look forward to seeing that. But with such limited time together during the regular season, and you've had Steph on here. We've talked to so many people. Like, there's only so much you can do in practice to simulate what's going to happen in a game. I just don't see how you can now throw Mitch out there in the postseason, and then it's like, all right, we're going to figure this thing out. Because you're still going to be figuring it out on the fly. The rhythm, the timing between those two, and understanding, like, both of them are going to be on the court at all times, that still has to be worked out. So it's not saying it's impossible, but I think there's, like, a little bit of a limitation if they're not sharing the floor now to get into some sort of rhythm through 17, 18 games while Mitch has been back. I just don't see how that now can just go be, hey, Mitch, you're in the starting lineup. We're going to figure this out right now. Game 1 against Detroit. I just find that tough to believe.